Yeah, we are live. The countdown begins. Uh, you can just start. We are live.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the PSI Education Committee, I extend a warm welcome to all of you in today's webinar. Over the past few months, the PSI Education Committee has been organizing online lectures on various aspects of physiology to provide a comprehensive, system wise understanding of physiology. By focusing on core physiological systems, we aim to bridge gaps in learning and foster engaging, interactive discussions that enhance both academic and clinical skills. In the previous months, we were privileged to have Dr. Bitin Kumar Maji to deliver a detailed lecture on EC coupling, which was appreciated for its depth and clarity. Building on this series, today's lecture will explore the cardiovascular and respiratory adaptations to exercise. We are very honored to have Dr. K. Praveen Kumar, Professor and Head of the Department of Physiology at Tomo Riba Institute of Health and Medical Sciences, Naharlagun, Arunachal Pradesh, as today's distinguished speaker. Dr. Kumar has an impressive academic background. He earned his master's in medical physiology from Kosturba Medical College, Manipal, Karnataka, and went on to obtain his PhD in physiology from Dr. NTR University of Health Sciences, Vijayawada, Andhra Pradesh. With over 18 years of teaching experience at reputed medical institutions across the India, Dr. Kumar has significantly contributed to physiology education and research. Currently, he holds various key positions at TRIHMS, including Member Secretary of Institutional Animal Ethics Committee, co-nodal officer of the Multidisciplinary Research Unit, and also the member of various other institutional committees, including the Medical Education Unit, Central Research Lab, and Animal House Committee. His research skill lies in neurophysiology, cognitive behavior, learning, and memory, and his work has earned him several awards and recognitions. Dr. Kumar has completed 6 research projects and also published 13 research articles in national and international journal of well repute and high impact factor. So, with this brief introduction, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. K. Praveen Kumar to today's seminar. Sir, we look forward to your insights into the physiological adjustment that occur during exercise. So, please welcome, sir. The platform is all yours, Dr. Kumar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words.
Welcome,
And
sir.
uh, I'm proceeding with the session. As sir has told already, this is PSI online lecture series. The topic is that cardiovascular and respiratory changes in response to exercise. And I assume that the participants and as well as those who want to see this, we need to have the basic fundamentals about the cardiovascular and respiratory physiology. That is a prerequisite to understand what happens in case of cardiovascular and respiratory systems in response to exercise. Going ahead with the topic. First, I would like to tell you what is the meaning of exercise. Here, when you see the word exercise, this comes from the Latin word that is exertium and the verb exercere together giving the meaning of to keep busy or to work out. And the next question arises is that why do we need this exercise? See, lot of research has been done on exercise and its effect, and all these research has shown that exercise is important for disease prevention. Not only for disease prevention, it is very much necessary for the health promotion. Now, when we say exercise, what is happening? All of you know that basic term exercise means here it is a physical activity or physical task. When our body is challenged with any physical task, our human body responds through a series of integrated changes. One should remember that the changes which are taking place in response to exercise are integrated changes but not isolated changes. And almost all the physiological systems are involved in these changes, may not be some of. Okay, now basic level, coming to the what is movement or movement, what it requires. Movement requires the activation and control of the musculoskeletal system, which we know that the basics of the physiology. And here the role cardiovascular system and respiratory system, they provide the ability to sustain this movement for a period of time or over a extended periods. Remember that for movement you need musculoskeletal system, but in order to sustain this movement we need cardiovascular and respiratory systems. Now what happens when we do exercise? See that we experience a range of physiological changes, like here oxygen utilization. All of us know that how much oxygen is utilized per minute by the tissues, as we learned from the respiratory physiology fundamentals, where it says that at the rest, 250 ml of oxygen is utilized by the tissues per minute, whole body. And this can increase tremendously to up to 10 times. It may go to up to 3 to 4 liters per minute by the body, depending upon the intensity of the exercise. See the table there, it shows that in case of mild exercise like slow walking, the oxygen utilization increases to 2 to 4 times of resting level. Resting level it is 250 ml per minute. In case of slow walking, it may go to up to 500 ml to 1 liter per minute. And moderate brisk walking 4 to 6 times of the rest. Heavy exercise like jogging for long time 6 to 8 times of the rest. Very heavy exercise like fast running, it can go to 8 to 10 times of the rest. Oxygen utilization increases. In addition to oxygen utilization, we have got the increased energy consumption. In order to bring any movement, skeletal muscle movement, we need to bring about the utilize the energy. This energy is provided by the ATP. And here, due to the continuous movement of the muscles, there it is continuous utilization of the ATP. This ATP exhaustion will be there. Okay, and there it is metabolic accumulation. In order to do, when while doing the exercise, there it is accumulation of metabolites takes place, like lactic acid, carbon dioxide, potassium, ADP. These metabolites goes on to accumulate while doing exercise. Because of the breakdown of ATP and this activity, there it is increased heat production. Now the question is that while doing exercise, all these changes are taking place, like increasing the oxygen utilization, energy is utilized, metabolites are accumulated, heat is increased, body temperature is increased. So what? What happens? If these things are not taken care of, muscles undergo fatigue or muscle may not be able to bring its contraction, so that movement is no longer possible. The changes whichever I mentioned, if they are not taken care of, muscle cannot no longer can contract, so no longer movement is possible, so that you cannot do any exercise. Now here it comes the role of your respiratory system and cardiovascular system, with the primary function of supplying adequate oxygen to the exercising muscles, or to supply the adequate oxygen to meet the demands. As well as, due to the exercise, there is a production of increased carbon dioxide, metabolic waste products. They need to be removed from the tissues or muscles. Okay, so there it is. And for supplying the nutrients and for maintaining the body temperature, the respiratory system, cardiovascular system in integrated manner, they bring on to changes. And when you see this overall or generalized, an individual's ability to exercise depends upon the capacity of the cardiac and respiratory systems to increase the delivery of oxygen to the tissue and remove the carbon dioxide from the body. These three lines give a gross idea of cardiac and respiratory systems, why they are necessary. Now we'll go one by one responses, what is happening here, and how do we see these physiological responses or changes to the exercise. Like, you may say that acute changes, or you may say short term changes, or you may say episodic responses, and you may say another under heading of long-term adaptation in case of trained individuals. Now we will see the acute or short-term or you say episodic responses or changes in response to exercise. So here the topic is today's topic is about cardiovascular and respiratory changes. Let us focus here and here say that acute or these episodic changes like respiratory responses, cardiovascular responses are listed here. Respiratory responses, increase in ventilation and increase in oxygen uptake. In case of cardiovascular responses, increase in cardiac output, increase in muscle blood flow, redistribution of blood, and change in blood pressure. We will see the details one by one. First, look at the respiratory responses. Increase in ventilation, or you say increase in pulmonary ventilation. What do you mean pulmonary ventilation? It is the volume of air taken in or breathed out per minute. It is normally 5 to 6 liters per minute. How do you calculate pulmonary ventilation? Here I have labeled as PV equal to TV multiplied by RR. PV stands for pulmonary ventilation, TV for tidal volume, RR for respiratory rate. So, pulmonary ventilation is the product of tidal volume and respiratory rate, and tidal volume is normally 500 ml per each breath. Okay, and respiratory rate is that 12 to 15 breaths per minute. So, when you calculate the pulmonary ventilation, tidal volume of 500 ml, respiratory rate of 12 if you take per minute, it gives the 5 liters per minute. This is normal pulmonary ventilation, and this ventilation goes on to increase in response to the exercise. Not only that, respiratory response is that increased oxygen uptake. Let us see further. Here, this slide details about the ventilation increases with the dynamic exercise here. And see this recording which is shown on the right side is that there it is oxygen consumption and on x-axis, total ventilation on the left axis, y-axis. See here, oxygen consumption beginning from 0 to it is 4 liters per minute, total ventilation is given in liters per minute. Now, look at this ventilatory demand is depending on metabolic requirement. What are the metabolic requirements? Supply of oxygen as well as nutrients. Next is that degree of lactic acidosis. How much lactic acid is produced, how much accumulation is taken, based on that the ventilator demand increases, and dead space also. Here we are not looking into the pathological condition. I am not discussing about the dead space. In healthy individuals at peak exercise, 70% of the maximum voluntary ventilation, we can reach to the 70% of maximum voluntary ventilation. Maximum voluntary ventilation is around 120 to 150 liters per minute, but we will be able to reach at the peak exercise up to 100 liters per minute. Our ventilation, pulmonary ventilation reaches to 100 liters per minute. And you see here how this happens. This ventilation in case of exercise, early stages of exercise, increases because of the increase in the respiratory rate and tidal volume. But in late exercise, this is primarily due to increase in the respiratory rate because tidal volume reaches to a plateau state. Normal tidal volume is 500 ml. In case of severe exercise or high level of exercise, it may go to up to 2500 ml, but not beyond that limitation. So it is reaching to a plateau. And thereafter, increase in the pulmonary ventilation is due to the increase in the respiratory rate. And now the question is that how this ventilation is increasing? Who is informing these respiratory muscles to increase the rate of respiration, depth of the respiration? Is this mechanism is neural mechanism, neurally driven mechanism, or chemical driven mechanism, or is it both? Okay, so it is easy to assume that because of the exercise, there are changes in the chemical changes taking place in the blood, like change in the partial pressure of gases, like partial pressure of oxygen, partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Because of the excess production of the carbon dioxide and lactic acid, there is a change in the pH. Okay, this may be driving the increase in the ventilation, but it is not true. As well as at the same time, it is not explicitly understood. But what we can assume is that which mechanism is taking care of this ventilation. Look at this picture. say where it shows the diagrammatic representation of changes in ventilation during exercise. Okay, and an exercise x-axis timeline and y-axis ventilation liters per minute. When you look at the picture, there it is. I have highlighted with the kind of rectangular shape. At the resting level, the exercise from resting level at the beginning of exercise, ventilation is abruptly increased. There it is, abrupt increase in the ventilation. And then there it is a pause, slight pause, 30 to 40 seconds of pause. Thereafter, there it is gradual increase in the ventilation reaching to the peak. So now here it says that at the beginning of exercise, or just the beginning of exercise, there it is abrupt increase in the ventilation. What could be the reason? If it was chemically mediated mechanism, you haven't started exercise here, but there it is ventilation increase. That means it must be a neural mechanism. So it is believed that whatever the signals are conveyed to the your exercising muscles, same responses or impulses are conveyed to the respiratory centers to increase the ventilation. And it is assumed that in anticipation of exercise, your limbic system mediated as well as cerebral cortex sends the information to the respiratory centers to increase the ventilation. And thereafter 30 to 40 seconds of pause, because of the increased ventilation, there it is decrease in the carbon dioxide levels, which may suppress the respiratory centers. So that 30 to 40 seconds there is no change in the ventilation. Thereafter, as individual goes on to do the exercise, there it is production of the chemical substances. Further, this chemical mediated fine tuning of the ventilation is taking place. So here, ventilation in response to exercise is neurally mediated and chemical mediated mechanism. And so now you see here, what are the changes taking place in the blood gases here? See here, oxygen consumption as a function of the metabolic changes that occur during exercise. Look at the picture where it shows that points like vertically drawn dark colored arrow like picture is there, that is anaerobic threshold level, and red color is the different recordings. Beginning for each curve, I have given label as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for explanation convenience. When you look at the curve 4, when you look at the curve which gives the ventilatory response, as VO2 is increased, as the oxygen consumption is increased, ventilation also increase in proportion to the oxygen consumption up to the level of anaerobic threshold. Okay, and from there the ventilation further rapidly increased. Okay, so overall here it is that anaerobic threshold is the point where your lactic acid production is going or getting accumulated beyond the limits, so that there it is increase the ventilation there. And next is that you see the third curve where it depicts the changes in the partial pressure of oxygen. Partial pressure of oxygen does not change throughout the exercise up to the anaerobic threshold. Beyond anaerobic threshold, partial pressure of oxygen is increasing, whereas partial pressure of carbon dioxide is remaining constant. Okay, why this partial pressure of oxygen is not changed, why partial pressure of carbon dioxide is not changed? Because due to the increase in the ventilation to meet the increased demand, there it is consistency is maintained, the our partial pressure of oxygen and our partial pressure of carbon dioxide is maintained, and lactate levels and pH is also not altered up to the anaerobic threshold level, because cardiovascular system is taken care of by increasing the blood flow. Okay, and you look at this here. Now the question is that one will learn that how ventilation is increased by neural mediated and chemical mediated mechanism. Now oxygen uptake by the lungs and further into the blood, how it is possible? And oxygen uptake may be about 20 times the resting oxygen uptake, reaching to the 4 liters per minute. And what are the mechanisms involved here? Increased alveolar to arterial gradient of PO2. When the blood reaches to the pulmonary circulation, there is a gradient available from the alveoli to the your venous blood, which is reaching into the pulmonary artery. So pulmonary arterial blood, we have to say. In case of alveoli, the partial pressure of oxygen is around 97 mmHg. In case of your pulmonary arterial blood is around 40 mmHg. and this gradient is itself is enough to bring the or extract the oxygen from the alveoli. But because of the your exercise, there it is increased oxygen utilization, so the partial pressure of pulmonary arterial blood is less than the resting level, so that this further facilitate the extraction of oxygen from the alveoli, as well as increased perfusion of lungs. There it is, opening up the opening up of the capillaries. Okay, because of the increased ventilation, increased rate and depth of respiration, there it is opening of the newer capillaries, increasing the perfusion. As the capillaries opening and alveolar stretching leads to the increased surface area available, so that it leads to increased perfusion as well as increased diffusing capacity of alveolar capillary membrane, so that more and more oxygen is extracted from the lungs and reaching to the blood in order to deliver the or meet the demands. Now look at the cardiovascular responses. In case of cardiovascular response, there it is increase in cardiac output, increase in muscle blood flow, redistribution of blood, and change in blood pressure. And grossly, there is a picture which is giving an idea about what are the changes taking place. One is that beginning with the curve number one, which gives the heart rate, and basic here it is showing 62. It is reaching to the up to 180 or 190 or beyond that point. Here heart rate, that point we will discuss later on. Stroke volume, initially it is increasing up to certain extent. Stroke volume is increasing, later on decreasing the stroke volume. Cardiac output is increasing in proportion to the intensity of exercise, and change in the blood pressure, peripheral resistance, we will see one by one. See here, the cardiac output. We define cardiac output is that it is the volume of blood pumped by the each ventricle per minute. It is normally 5 liters per minute. But in case of exercise, this cardiac output can be increased to, or cardiac output goes on to raise to up to 25 liters per minute. In case of well-trained, strong athletes, it can reach to 35 to 50 liters per minute. And this increase in cardiac output is proportional to the increase in oxygen consumption. As oxygen consumption increases, cardiac output also increases. Now here we need to understand one fundamental factor, that cardiac output is determined, or cardiac output is the product of heart rate and stroke volume. If any of this factor is influenced by any of the factor is influenced, heart rate or stroke volume, which in turn causes the changes in the cardiac output. Now with respect to exercise, how the cardiac output is increasing, what is happening to the heart rate and stroke volume, let us see here. Heart rate, in case of exercise, there it is sympathetic discharge takes place. Okay, because of the exercising muscles. Okay, exercising muscle proprioception nerve signals are generated. There it is sympathetic discharge increases, and this sympathetic discharge increases the SA node to get stimulated. So the number of impulses generated by the SA node will increase, which in turn increases the heart rate. Okay, as heart rate is the one of the determinant of cardiac outputs, certainly cardiac output increases. Muscle heart reflexes, like while exercising, peripheral responses from the exercising muscles, joint receptors send the information to the higher centers to increase the heart rate, so leads to increase in the heart rate, further to increase the cardiac output. And due to the sympathetic discharge, there it is release of catecholamines from the adrenal gland, which in turn increases the heart rate, as well as due to the exercise, there it is increase in the temperature. Increase in the temperature further stimulates the SA node, leading to increase in the heart rate. Overall, these four major factors are increasing the heart rate, so that cardiac output is increased. Now coming to the stroke volume. Stroke volume also increased because of the sympathetic discharge. Sympathetic discharge causes the positive effect on your heart, increases the myocardial contractility. As the myocardial contractility is increased, it leads to increased force of contraction by the heart. And stroke volume depends on the force of contraction. As force of contraction increases, stroke volume increases, which in turn leads to increase in the cardiac output. Not only that, and there it is increase in the preload, or we say end diastolic volume. End diastolic volume means the volume of blood which is present in the heart or in the ventricle at the end of diastolic, which is usually 120 ml per minute. Due to this sympathetic discharge, and what happens there, it is increase in the end diastolic volume. This sympathetic discharge further causes the venous, vasodilation, which in turn leads to the amount of blood reaching to the heart increases, as well as because of this exercising muscle, there is increased contraction relaxation of the skeletal muscle, which in turn leads to the increase in the skeletal muscle pump, which is one of the factor influences the venous return. In addition to this, respiratory rate is increasing while exercising, respiratory pump, as well as increase in the abdominal pressure, which in turn leading to the increased venous return. As venous return is increased, the amount of or volume of blood reaching to the heart is increasing, so that end diastolic volume increases. As end diastolic volume increases, this blood goes on to stretch the cardiac muscle fiber, which leads to increase in the length of the cardiac muscle fiber. Here comes the your Frank Starling's law. Force of contraction is directly proportional to the initial length of the muscle fiber. So cardiac muscle length fiber is increased, because of which force of contraction is increased. As force of contraction is increased, stroke volume increase, because of which cardiac output increases. In case of exercise, both heart rate and stroke volume is increasing, so that leading to the cardiac output is increased. Excuse me. Now, coming to the what extent, who is the major contributor to increase in cardiac output during exercise? It is your heart rate. Stroke volume can reach to a certain extent, but not much. The role of stroke volume in increasing the cardiac output during untrained people are basic, moderate level or mild exercise, it is minimal. In case of trained individuals, this stroke volume is the major one which increase in the cardiac output, which we will see towards the end. But here, main factor which is increasing the cardiac output in response to exercise is that heart rate. This heart rate can reach to, say that basal heart rate, that 60 to 100 per minute. But here, uh, there is a rough calculation is the target heart rate, which you can use with your age. So in case of 40-year-old, the heart rate can be up to 180 beats per minute, which can reach at the end of, towards the exercise. Okay. Now, moving on to the increased cardiac output to increased skeletal muscle blood flow. Now we learned that there it is ventilatory response increased, oxygen uptake is increased, and increased cardiac output, as well as increased skeletal muscle blood flow. In case of skeletal muscle, during the resting time, they receive around 2 to 4 ml of I'm very sorry, 2 to 4 ml of blood per 100 grams of tissues per minute. This is what is happening to the skeletal muscle. But during exercise, this blood flow can reach to the 50 to 80 ml per 100 grams per minute. So there it is huge amount of increase in the blood flow to the skeletal muscles. Why this blood flow is increasing to skeletal muscle? It is due to the arteriolar dilation and opening up of capillaries. Specifically, pre-sphincters of the capillaries is opening up, so that leads to increased blood flow to the skeletal muscle. Why should there could be increase in the skeletal muscle blood flow? It is to provide the enough or adequate oxygen to the tissues, and your provision of nutrients and washing or getting rid of metabolic accumulations. And what are the mechanisms involved? Here it is autonomic control, that is sympathetic control. There it is sympathetic discharge we learned. In case of skeletal muscles, blood vessels which are supplying the skeletal muscles are innervated with the cholinergic sympathetic nerve fibers. In response to sympathetic discharge, it leads to sympathetic vasodilation of skeletal muscle blood vessels, which leads to increased blood flow. Metabolic control. Due to the accumulation of metabolites like carbon dioxide, lactic acid, potassium, ADP, they may go on to increase the or bring about the vasodilation effect on the blood vessels. And humoral control, you say that it is, some of them won't accept, but there is a say some of the scientists believe that adrenaline causes the vasodilation in the skeletal muscles, so that overall they are increasing the skeletal muscle blood flow up to 50 to 80 ml per 100 grams per minute from the resting levels of 2 to 4 ml per 100 grams of tissue per minute. Next, moving on to the redistribution of the blood flow. Okay, here, while at rest, how much blood is reaching to the tissues, and during the exercise, what is happening to the blood flow. See that resting level, it is in the picture, it is given. Sorry, I did not place the source of this picture. The source of picture is that from, I have taken the Vander textbook of physiology, which is McGraw Hill publications. And here, when you look at the blood flow to the initial brain and heart, there it is increase in the cerebral blood flow and coronary blood flow. In order to, these are the vital organs involved in exercise, so that there should be increased blood flow as per the demand. Next, coming to the skeletal muscle, there it is tremendous increase in the blood flow to the skeletal muscles. See there, around resting, whole skeletal muscle is receiving around 1 liter of blood per minute. It may lead to one 12 liters, 12 liters 500 ml per minute. Tremendous increase in the skeletal muscle blood flow. This is possible because of the sympathetic vasodilation, metabolic reasons. And skin. Normally, in mild to moderate exercises, the blood flow to the skin decreases, but in severe exercise, blood flow to the skin also increases to dissipate the increased heat due to the exercise. And coming to the renal and abdominal organs, coming to the kidney and abdominal organs, there it is vasoconstrictions take place, and blood flow to the kidney and abdominal organs is decreased. Other tissues, there it is fall in the blood flow, and there it is increased blood flow to the adipose tissues also. Because of the increased blood flow to the tissue, adipose tissue, increased mobilization of the lipids, so that the lipolysis, they can be utilized as a energy source. This is what is happening at vasculature level. Then, changes in the blood pressure. So, what is happening with respect to blood pressure? As we learned that cardiac output is increased. Cardiac output is the determinant of blood pressure. That is specifically systolic blood pressure. In case of exercise, systolic blood pressure increases. It can go to up to 180 millimeters of mercury in exercise, 160, 180 millimeters of mercury. Okay, and this systolic blood pressure increase is due to increase in the so-called liver heart rate, increase in the stroke volume, increase in the cardiac output, increase in the systolic blood pressure, leading to increased blood pressure, leading to increased blood flow, so that perfusion of the tissues is increased. Next, coming to the diastolic blood pressure. Due to the vasodilation, huge amount of vasodilation taking place in the skeletal muscles. Vasodilation, coronary blood flow is increasing because of the coronary vasodilation, and cerebral vasodilation. Because of all this, there it is fall in the peripheral resistance, so that you may see that there is decrease in the diastolic blood pressure. And coming to the mean arterial blood pressure, there is slight increase in the mean arterial blood pressure in response to mild to moderate exercise. In severe exercise, slight rise in the mean arterial blood pressure, and pulse pressure becomes widened. As systolic blood pressure is increasing, diastolic blood pressure is decreasing, the range pulse pressure is widened. In pulmonary circulation, there it is slight increase in the systolic and diastolic blood pressure. These are the changes taking place in the blood pressure in response to the exercise. And summary of cardiovascular changes during mild upright exercise. The person was sitting quietly prior to this exercise. You see here, skeletal muscle blood flow is increasing by 175%. Mean arterial blood pressure around 15% increase in the mean arterial blood pressure. In case of systolic arterial blood pressure, around 50% increase in the systolic arterial blood pressure, whereas diastolic blood pressure almost it is constant, maybe slight decrease. So as well as total peripheral resistance is decreased by 50%. Now the question comes, when the peripheral resistance is decreased by 50% and the difference between the systolic and diastolic should be widened. But it is not so, because nervous system will not allow, our nerve signals higher centers will not allow the blood pressure to fall too much. They try to maintain the systolic and diastolic blood pressures by increasing the venoconstriction, venous compartment. See, there is a difference. Here skeletal muscle below vasodilation is there in skeletal muscle, but same nervous signals are going to increase the stimulation or causes the venoconstriction, because of which your venous return is increasing and diastolic blood pressure is maintaining. Otherwise diastolic blood pressures might have fallen to a level where too much of vasodilation, blood flow might have been compromised. This is being maintained. And there it is coming to the cardiac output, increasing the cardiac output by 120%, and heart rate is increasing by 90%. See that, as I said, target heart rate, if you say that on 220 minus your age, that is around, if you say 40-year age old, 220 minus 40, it is target heart rate is that 180. Normal heart rate, if you say that 60 to 90, so almost it is going to 90% increase in the heart rate. And stroke volume is 30%. Here once again it shows that the importance of heart rate in increasing the cardiac output in response to the exercise. Then coming to the end diastolic ventricular volume. See, cardiac muscle cannot be stretched too much. Though venous return is increased, heart can accommodate blood to up to some extent only. So end diastolic volume may increase from the resting levels to our normal levels to more than 10%. That is why stroke volume contribution towards the increase in the cardiac output in untrained individuals is less, minimal. And in case of trained individual, heart rate is less and stroke volume role is more. Next is that, look at the cardiac function and various parameters change. First row, if you take at rest, oxygen is, as we discussed, it may be 250 ml per minute, and pulse rate normal range 64 per minute, and cardiac output 5 to 6 liters per minute, and stroke volume it is 60 to 100 ml per minute. And see the arteriovenous oxygen difference, it is around 4 to 5 ml per 100 ml of blood. This is what is happening at resting. Now as you see that each row, that exercise work done during the exercise goes on as it is increasing, there it is increase in the oxygen utilization per minute. Beginning with resting, it is 250 ml per minute. It is, this picture is showing that oxygen utilization is going up to 3 liters per minute, and pulse rate, see that heart rate, it is going to around 173 per minute, and cardiac output leading to 5 liters to 20 liters per minute, or 21 liters in this picture it is showing. And stroke volume, it is not much. Normal initially stroke volume is 100 ml, it is maybe reaching to 120 or 125 ml. So that there it is. And arteriovenous oxygen difference, how much oxygen utilized, we say utilization coefficient is 25%. What is this utilization coefficient? When you take the arterial compartment of oxygen, it is 19 ml per 100 ml of blood, whereas venous compartment oxygen levels are, it is 14 ml per 100 ml of blood. That means 5 ml of oxygen is taken up by the tissues, which is equivalent to 25% of arterial compartment. That is what we say utilization coefficient. As you see, with the increase in the severity of exercise or increase in the work done, leading to increased AV oxygen difference, leading to up to 15 ml per deciliter. This is what is happening in cardiac function with exercise. And moving on to further, long-term adaptations are changes in the exercise. in response to exercise, in respiratory responses and cardiovascular responses. Respiratory responses, as we learned, increase in the pulmonary ventilation and increase in oxygen uptake may not change much with respect to long-term adaptations or trained individuals. Only thing is here it is that your respiratory rate, pulmonary ventilation, they usually normally in exercise they can reach to 70% of maximum voluntary ventilation. This may further increase in endurance training. Coming to the cardiovascular responses, due to training training or long term exercise, there is increase in the size of the cardiac muscle fiber. As cardiac muscle fiber size increases, ventricular mass increases, posterior wall thickness, septal wall thickness increases in such a way that it won't compromise the functionality of the heart. Up to some extent increases within the limits which can help to meet the demands. As cardiac muscle fiber thickness is increasing, there it is increased force of contraction leads to increase in the hypertrophy of muscle, leading to increased force of contraction. As force of contraction is increased, stroke volume increase, cardiac output is increased, so that it meets the demands. Here, one thing you have to remember that untrained or mild or moderate exercises, the role of stroke volume or the contribution of stroke volume in increasing the cardiac output is less. But in case of trained individuals, this increased stroke volume contribution also plays a major role, as well as heart rate decreases in case of trained individuals. Heart rate decreases, increased plasma volume, leading to increased venous return and increased cardiac output. Overall, increases the exercise capability or endurance of the individual. These are the long-term adaptation changes taking place in response to the exercise. And with this, I am concluding this session. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for delivering an such an engaging and insightful lecture. Mm, You also detailed discussion on the cardiovascular and respiratory adaptations to such kind of physical stress, uh, and you also get some kinds of deeper understanding how these vital systems actually coordinate under this kind of exercise and physical stress. And your expertise is obviously enriched by years of research and teaching truly added some kinds of value to today's discussion. Uh, but I have very fundamental questions for some query.
Yes, sir.
Sir, how this kind of, if you just consider that VO2 max as such kind of changes, how high intensity or high intensity interval training and steady state training actually they make some kinds of impact on the VO2 max during cardiovascular adaptation and the respiratory adaptation. If you highlight that aspect.
See, high intensity exercise during this VO2 max increased because of this ventilation increase, as well as there it is increased oxygen uptake and extraction of the oxygen by the tissues increases. And here, with long term and this exercise, high intensity exercise leads to here cardiovascular response. Primarily, the in exercise, the limiting factor is cardiac output. Here, by increasing the stroke volume as well as heart rate, here there it is increase in the delivery of the blood to the tissues, which in turn leading to the maximum oxygen utilization by the tissue.
Okay, sir. Thank you. And also, sir, how the adaptations in the respiratory muscles actually contributing in the improved exercise performance if you consider these kind of adaptations.
Sir, respiratory muscle, see, along with the simple thing is that along during the exercise, the muscular strength is or endurance is increasing. But lung size as such, it doesn't increase. But what happens is that increased perfusion, increased oxygen extraction by the blood from the lungs. This is the long-term adaptation is taking place. New capillaries are opening up. Okay, leads to this kind of a changes or adaptive changes.
Okay. And also, you mentioned about some long-term and short-term adaptations, and among them the hypertrophy, cardiac hypertrophy, the structural changes in the cardiac tissue. You have highlighted that.
Yes.
So, is any kind of impact is there for the different intensities of exercise that actually affect the this kind of hypertrophic changes in the cardiovascular structure?
Sir, as of my knowledge, it is
Yeah.
that hypertrophy of the heart takes place, or cardiac hypertrophy takes place with respect in response to long-term training. And here, what we learned that is that there it is increase in the ventricular muscle mass, as well as for we say posterior wall thickness, septal wall thickness. But with respect to with at different levels of exercise, how much change is taking place in the cardiac muscle mass, that record I do not have. So
Yeah.
that is what my limitations are.
Yeah. Sir, one question is there in the PSI official group. Why is it that gym goers with overexercise undergo severe cardiac arrest?
Sorry, sir, I did not understand.
Why is it that gym goers who going to the gym for that exercise and the bodybuilding with overexercise undergo severe cardiac arrest?
Sir, I do not know why exactly gym going people are having this. It may be due to excessive training. The cardiac hypertrophy is going beyond its limitation. During
Yes.
severe exercise, there it is compromising the coronary blood flow, which in turn may be leading to severe cardiac arrest. But in physiological limit, cardiac hypertrophy in trained individual takes place, but that is not to the level of harmful. But in case of severe exercise, because of the compromise in the blood flow to the heart, leading to severe cardiac arrest in gym goers.
Thank you, sir. Sir, another thing, what do you think that whatever the individual differences, like if you consider the genetics or the gender variation, how they impact in the that long-term cardiovascular adaptation? Is there any impact, or whatever actually the thing that contribute in that kind of differences in the cardiovascular adaptation individual to individual?
it, it is there, sir. The individual to individual variations are there, but again, actually, to point that which who is more prone to have this endurance ability, all this it all depends upon the prior to the starting the training, what is their condition. Based on that only, it goes on to change, sir, adapt. But specific targeting specific thing, I do not have any information.
Okay, thank you, sir, for such an very insightful uh, lecture and deliberation. And at the end, I now like to welcome Dr. Sampa Sarkar Vishwas for delivering the formal vote of thanks and some other announcements. Welcome.
Yeah, good evening, all. And it was an exciting, very
Good
exciting
evening.
topic that Dr. Praveen has presented today. A very vast topic in a very crisp way. And at the end, it was a very good discussion session with Dr. Sandeep putting on questions and Dr. Praveen answering those questions. I hope the students enjoy this question and answer session going on with Dr. Praveen and Dr. Sandeep. And at the very onset, I'd like to thank the Physiological Society of India for permitting us to use this platform and share our topics of interest, and so that we can deliver it to the students, which the student community can get easy access and get benefited to. I thank our president, PSI, Professor Dr. Proshun Priya Nayak, for constantly intriguing us to add up new topics and to give scope to new presenters using this platform. I would like to thank Dr. Kaushik Bharati for guiding us to carry on this program every month on the 4th of Saturday. And I would like to thank all the members of the PSI Education Committee for being active members of this Physiological Education Committee. And at the last, I would like to announce the next topic of the next lecture series, that is the seventh PSI online lecture series. It would be on neurological control of cardiovascular system, and it would be coordinated by Dr. Dakshayani Mohapatro, and it will be aired on 23rd of November 2024, uh, evening 8 to 9 p.m. So thank you all for joining us in this session live.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you,
Thank
And
ma'am.
you.
before signing off, I would like to mention a couple of things. Uh, Basically, this presentation is peripheral presentation. This topic itself needs a lot of discussion, but keeping the undergraduate students in the mind, the presentation is prepared at a peripheral level. Please keep a note of it. Thank you.